Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Members, I bring to you Senate Bill 204 with President Joe May with me today, representing the Louisiana Technical College system in Louisiana. Some of you will remember, I know Mr. Murray and Ms. Buffington remember clearly what we did in 2007 when we saw our technical colleges about to collapse around our ears and our labor force was about gone in this state. And we passed the first piece of legislation to begin to rebuild those schools. The end result has been a huge success story throughout this state. And the bill I bring to you today is the second step in completing that work. The effective date is 2015, Mr. Chairman. It's a phase-in for the construction and rebuilding and refurbishing of our schools. People often ask me why I think this is so critical, and I'll just give you one piece of information that sticks in my mind. I think I shared it with you in 2007. Out of every 100 kids that enter the 9th grade in this state and throughout this nation, about 20 are going to get a college degree. 5 are going to get some college. 75% of those children are outside the system of higher education that we spend an enormous amount of time trying to make right. Without them, there is no skilled labor force in this state. We have no economic development. The first bill we passed went a long way. The enrollment has skyrocketed to the point that the capacity is being stretched again. And so that's why I bring it to you. We obviously went through revenue and came out of there, and now on our dual referral to finance. I would now give to you President Joe May for whatever comments he would make to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joe May, and I'm president of the Louisiana Community and Technical College System. Just a few comments, if I might. We've seen a dramatic transition in the needs of the workforce in the state of Louisiana. As we're walking in today, I was handed a report showing that between now and 2016 that we're going to need to increase our workforce by over 36,000 people to meet the needs that exist. One of the challenges that we've had is that the facilities that have been in place, many of them 60s, 70s, and some far back as the late 20s, were not designed for the types of jobs and careers that we have today. And these aren't just entry-level jobs. These are some of the best jobs in the state of Louisiana. What this will enable us to do is to increase the number of what we call learning stations. That simply means welding booths, machine technology labs, nursing beds across the state, to going from about 9,000 to 14,000. And we believe that this will take us a long way toward meeting the needs of this century. Members of the committee, you've got the fiscal note. This will not have an impact for the upcoming year, 2014. The proposed that the bonds that would be sold would be sold in phases. The phase 1 would be 2015, phase 2 would be 2016, phase 3 would be 2017, so that the full impact would hit there. There would be in about one-third would be the approach that we would take to implementing these, given the types of time frame that we've discovered through previous legislation to meet the needs.
I think when you look at the fiscal note, it's important to note, I think it's showing you 20 million, 20 million, 20 million across the board. That's really not what happens when you phase in the bond. I think the correct number is 9 million, 18 million, and 27. I know there's no opposition, so.
In a perfect world, Senator Adley, in a perfect world. Is there any questions from the committee? Senator Tarver.
I agree with you that it's a great need in this state, but at the same time, you have to look at the overall state. What about the colleges in this state? The problem that they're having right now with physical plants, Every year we spend so much money trying to rehab all of these physical plants. And we're taking care of one side and we're forgetting about the other side.
I'm going to let you respond. When I did my research, I asked the same question. I think that our universities are in sad shape. I agree. I think skyrocketing tuition, facilities. But I dig into the report from the Board of Regents about capacity and excess capacity at our universities. And it's huge. There are only two places that need more capacity, according to this report: LSU and the technical colleges. Given more capacity, we train more, train better, the state grows, and the coffers grow. I mean, that's what I weighed when I went through it. If there were another piece of legislation here to try to deal with whatever needs they have, I will tell you, Senator Tarver, I've actually passed specific bills dealing with specific needs of some of the universities that have been mine in the past, and plan to continue to help them in any way I can. I only want to reiterate to you, though, I spend a lot of time, as you do, trying to deal with our universities and higher education when I got 75% of these kids needing something else.
Well, you know, right now we're dealing with a budget, and I think we're dealing with monopoly money, to be honest with you, because we don't know what to believe, what's factual in the budget and what's not factual in the budget at this particular time. Do you think it's right now our biggest problem with the budget and money? Do you think we ought to do this now, or form a study group to look into this? Because right now, let me say this. I don't have to say we're broke. You understand that. But when you start taking $20 million from the top, somebody gonna get hurt. And it's gonna be these universities, could be healthcare.
You know, I hear what you're saying. And that's one of the reasons why it's delayed. But I think you have to analyze, why are we in the position we're in? And one of the reasons we're in the position we're in is the lack of the skilled labor force that we need to grow the state. I can tell you, I have had the pleasure, as some of you sit in some of these meetings through economic development. I actually went to Germany for those meetings when we were talking about getting a big steel mill, and it is the labor force that's critical. It's absolutely critical. And at this stage of the game, we're at full capacity, and the demand is continuing. I think the way to get us out of this mess is to grow ourselves out of this mess. I will also say this to you, that I think the other way out of the mess is that when you look at our budget, and y'all sit on finance, y'all know it, but look, I'm telling y'all, I chaired this appropriations committee. I know a little something about it. And the year that I had it, when I got it, the entire state general fund was $4 billion. And we were $1.5 billion in the red. They were cutting off utilities at this state capitol for the non-payment of bills, and we were delaying paychecks to our employees. I clearly understand what it takes to get out of the mess. I will tell you, Senator Tarver, I will never forget, I think it was, and you will appreciate the story. 60 Rabin was chairman of Senate Finance at the time. I was chairman in the House. Back in those days, Mr. Chairman, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have cell phones. All you had was the three major networks. They showed up down here in Louisiana and said, we want to interview the two of you live on CBS 6 o'clock news across the nation. We only have one question for you. And they wired us both up. And I sat down, and 60 was on my left, and this was the question. Senator, our representative at the time, we would like to know what you would like to say to the businessmen and women of America to get them to come to Louisiana when they know you've got more welfare here than anybody else. And they know that your schools are in deplorable condition and your roads are in deplorable condition, and here you are as chairman cutting that money. What do you say to get them to come here? That was the one question live on CBS. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw 60 Raymond rip his microphone off and leave, and left me sitting there by myself. And I looked at them and said, every good businessman knows the way to prosper is to buy cheap, sell high. That's where we are in Louisiana, and we're just about there again. But you cannot cut our way out of it. We got to grow our way out of it. And this labor force is critical for that to happen. It will not happen without that.
Thank you, Senator Tarver. Senator White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Adley, by growing this system, or Dr. May, have you seen the projections in 2 to 3 years, 4 years, how many skilled laborers or certificate laborers we can put out?
Yes, sir, I do. I was looking at the report today. The low end is basically somewhere in the neighborhood of 33,000. The high end, 63,000 job growth would be the range that we're looking at. I think those are conservative numbers. We know that there is being, not only now, but in the next couple of years, significant investment in the state. And we've seen across the state that we're, the growth of the manufacturing sector, and that includes processing, chemicals, and others, is going to be the fastest growing component of the workforce. And right now, we do not have the workers to meet that need.
Well, I have to say I agree with you. In the last 2 years, I've had occasion to be on site of many wells that's being drilled in Louisiana, and I sit and talk to those people that are the companies that's doing that work, and I look at the license plates, and they're Texas, and they're Mississippi, and they're Florida, and I ask them, why aren't you hiring Louisiana workers? And they said, you just don't have them. They're not here. We can't hire them. I would love to not be able to pay 3 hours travel for every time one of these welding trucks shows up, or every time one of these specialty trucks shows up. I have to pay 3 hours labor both ways. It'd be much simpler if we could hire them right here in Louisiana, and we would do that. I have to know that part of it's our fault that when I worked for ExxonMobil 25 years ago, when they were competing with the world for facilities and expansions and new petrochemical sites, they were still bringing them to Louisiana. Because at that time, to the person, the vice presidents would say, the Louisiana workmen, we can still show it that they are the best bang for the buck in the world. But that's no longer true. It's not that they aren't good, we just don't have enough of them. They're still willing to work. Have you, the 10% match on all these projects, have you looked at if we go to a higher match, what that would do? What it would do to the fiscal note?
Yeah, we've looked at that. Obviously, it's a bit of a rural-urban issue, but we believe the match is a absolutely critical component of this bill. That one of the things that we've seen in the past, that often we build facilities that are disconnected from the employers, disconnected from the community. This will force that type of, let's sit down, let's talk, let's make sure we're building the facilities that meet not only the needs now, but in the future. And if I could, Senator, I would just comment. You know, one of the things that worries me as I look at the economy and the workforce, and like you, when you frankly hit a nerve when you said when you drive by the hotels and you see the out-of-state license plates in the parking lots. We have a choice. We can either provide the hotels and the restaurants and the housekeepers and those types of jobs for out-of-state people to come in and to work in the state, or we can train people for those good jobs that exist in our own communities. I think that's a choice that we're really looking at having to make as a state.
And I think those jobs are not $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year jobs. Many of those jobs are $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. Some make $100,000 a year if they want to work a lot of overtime. It's what we got away from. We tried to make everybody go to four-year universities. But the thing we do best in this state is work. We just don't have the workers anymore, I don't think. And I don't think, I understand Region's position. They're nervous that they're not going to get the projects. But our Capital Region delegation, we just supported $50 million for engineering building at LSU. We supported money for Southern. I have Southeastern in my district in Hammond. They're building a new building. They built new buildings 2 years ago. I don't think their buildings go away. I know it's a tough call, but if we don't prop up our community and technical schools, then we're not going to get those workers that we so desperately need in the short term here in the state. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Senator LaFleur?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Adler, the projects that are outlined in here, how well have they been researched as far as the actual cost for each one?
The one, we've looked at that thoroughly. There, Senator, obviously in some cases, if you would ask the people at the college or even in the community, they would say there should be a larger investment than's being made there. But we looked at what the real needs were, what we could project out, and to the best of our ability to make certain that we were meeting those needs that would meet the needs not only now but into the near future.
And the pricing on these projects, does that include the 10% or is that exclusive of the 10%?
The 10% would be added on top of it. That's a requirement of the match. However, you don't build the project at all until you get that match in there. The bill is very specific. It can't go forward, and the dollar amounts are fixed. We couldn't take, say, a project for Baton Rouge Community College and use it in Shreveport or Bossier City or vice versa.
And when would you start all the projects? If you cannot start any of the projects until you have your $1 million or 10%.
That's exactly correct. And that's project specific. We would the plan is laid out that we would, if the bill is passed and signed into law, that we would spend 2014 preparing for that process, identifying the needs, looking that's out there, frankly raising the money. And for those that are ready in 2015 that have met the required match, we could go forward with those. Those are not. We still have 2 more years to raise the dollars to equal the match.
So you have to raise about $25 million, right? If it's
That's exactly right.
So you wouldn't start any of the projects until 15.
That's correct.
And of course, you wouldn't issue debt on those projects that you didn't have your private match.
That's correct, and that's why we're phasing in the selling of the bonds. That would be at about we estimate it's about a one-third. We'll stick to that regardless of if we over collect on the amount. We'll just have to prioritize that in some fashion. But obviously, we want to reward those who've gone out, gotten on it, and raised the dollars locally. That's a critical part of this bill.
And you've evaluated your fundraising capacity too? I mean, the realistic, what you think you can raise in each of the areas?
I am very confident that our colleges can do this. This would be an all-time record for two-year colleges in the state of Louisiana. We've not had the history of fundraising. However, I don't think we've ever had the incentive to raise funds at the level that we're talking about here. And I looking at many of our chancellors and directors behind us, I have all the confidence in the world that they can make this happen.
And do you currently have commitments that you can share with us on the private side of who's made commitments to any one of these projects?
We do in a few cases. I mean, one of the big ones that we've talked about publicly is the shipbuilding program in conjunction with the Avondale shipyards. The U.S. Navy has put forth $10 million. That would be a match. So in that case, that's a 100% match for that particular project.
All right. Thank you.
Senator Shawbear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. May, Senator Adler, thank y'all for y'all work. For those of you who do not know in the audience, I chair the Senate subcommittee on the LCTS system, so this is an issue that I've been involved with very early on. I've expressed my concerns both to the Senator and to Dr. May. A couple of questions. I agree with, in many ways, what everyone who has spoken has said, both for and against. We've got situations with our four-year universities where facility planning has now forced our universities to go hunt for capital outlay money just to replace a roof, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. I believe that the folks from facility planning alluded to that in testimony in front of Revenue and Fizz. There are some inequities that I find in the bill that we've had conversations with, and Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment that I'd like to offer up that can possibly put this bill in a more palatable posture. Dr. May, you just said that the capacity for raising money for these particular projects has never been more achievable. What I would like to see done is a removal of the cap for that fundraising. Let's say any particular community technical school has a partner in the marketplace where those jobs are needed, and they say, hey, listen, we want to put up X amount of $1 million towards that project because we want to see it done yesterday. If we remove this cap, I think that will happen. We just had a situation just last year that Dr. May was very supportive of, where we had a partner in Terrebonne Parish. Terrebonne Parish, for those of you who do not know, has the lowest unemployment in the state, fifth largest market. We're at 4%. It's the 8th best in the nation. We can't find enough people to work. So very much so, I support what the community technical college system is doing. But along the lines of the question of Senator LaFleur, are we sure that we're spending this money in the places that we need it? We could build 3 more facilities around the Fletcher campus and some of the campuses in Terrebonne Parish that will employ literally, hundreds, maybe thousands of particular people. We've got a saying at Fletcher, 60K, it's 2 years away. We've got tremendous opportunity down to Bayou. We had a marine facility. That's one of the only ones in the country that has been floundering away in the capital outlay process, neglected. We have a belief, a strong belief, that that thing is going to grow from, let me see what the numbers are. Yeah, it was at 1,700 in 2012, and we anticipate an increase of 13% in this calendar year alone. But that project's not in this bill. Now, again, it's been floundering away in the capital outlay process, so I do believe that some targeting towards projects needs to be done, and I'm committed to working with the senator on the floor. But at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer up this amendment, if staff would like.
Senator Adderley, have you seen the amendment?
Yes.
Yeah, I have seen it, and I don't think that we would object to the amendment, but I heard one of your comments. I'm hoping when you said you're looking forward to working with me on the floor, we're getting that work done now.
Between here and the floor, I'd like to continue discussion. This just, I think, puts it in a posture that may be able to get it out of committee.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we have an amendment 1383 on Senate Bill 204, offered by Senator Shawbear. Is there objection to that amendment?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Question on the amendment, Senator Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure I'm clear, so that when we do the amendment, it says no less than 12%, and so we take the cap off, so there's no cap anymore at all. And I'm just want to ask Dr. May, you responded to a question earlier about the ability to raise this match, and you could do it under the current version of the bill. I mean, what does this do to some of those projects in and around the state by not having a cap? What does that do?
Well, I think it does require us to work harder. Senator, and talking to our chancellors, and I did have this conversation with them about it, and directors as well, we believe this is doable. And that this will, I'm more concerned, Senator, about the rural areas in many ways and the urban areas and the capacity to do this. But I have committed my time to. I will make up that difference as well as the cap, and commit my time to make that happen. I think that's doable.
Well, that was part of my concern, because quite frankly, being from the New Orleans area, I don't think it would be difficult for us to be able to do this stuff. But in some of these rural areas, it may be a little more difficult. And I guess just to go further then, so that if these other institutions are able to reach, if this amendment gets on, are able to reach their match, then how does this process go with actually building the buildings?
We will, once that match is reached, we'll be ready to move forward out of the gate.
So irrespective of to what part of the state it's in, once the match is met, we're going to start building.
We're committed to all projects equally.
But I want to be clear.
But I think the point is, what he said a moment ago, and I hear where you're coming from, I think you're right. The projects are match specific. So,
right.
I mean, when the match is in play, you got to move. You can't make somebody else wait when they're ready to rock and roll, is my view.
Okay. Thank you.
And we've had that happen before, where someone gave a match and then we delayed a year or two, and quite honestly, they don't think we're very serious at that point, and respecting them, so we want to move quickly on that.
Well, that's the only point I wanted to make sure that we're clear on that. So as the match, when you put the match in play, it's time to start building. We're not going to wait for other schools around the state to get to their match. When
That's
the
right.
match is, thank you. That's
And
it,
I
Mr.
think the
Chairman.
amendment's consistent with that, so we don't see a problem.
All right, on the amendment, Senator Chauvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, when we remove the cap, it just enables whatever private partner that there is to give as much money to the project as we
he
possibly can.
Yeah.
If the cap was in place, there would be a hard ceiling, and say we had a fundraising effort for a project that we were able to raise $2 million, $3 million. According to the bill, we wouldn't be able to do that. You can only apply $1 million towards that particular project. This enables us to raise as much money as we can, take the state off the hook for as much as we can, and really get to where business and industry is driving what projects are going to be built, as opposed to the process. Now, there's another aspect of this amendment that I want to be, just in a spirit of full disclosure, we're also raising that percentage required from 10 to 12%. Now, if I had my druthers, I'd like to see it a heck of a lot higher than that, because I think, again, that would put the onus on business and industry driving which projects moved forward. But in the spirit of compromise, I think that 12 is a little more palatable for this committee right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. All right, members, we have Amendment 1383. Yeah, Amendment 1383. Is there objection to the adoption of Amendments 1383? Senator Murray on the amendment.
Yeah, 'cause I want to be clear, because I don't know, Senator, if it's your intention to say 12%, but this says no less than 12, so it can go up higher, and that's what this does. Is that the intention?
Well, look, I think the point is, if I've heard all this discussion, I think it's really helpful if you've got someone who's putting up private money. If you just say, look, it's 10%, and they might be in a position to do the 15, whatever guideline we give them, that's generally what they're going to grab hold of. I think I understand what he's saying, and I put my faith in President May. If he believes that we can pull this off at 12, I'm going to support that. If he didn't, I obviously would be opposed to that. But with that, I just want to say this to this committee. I mean, I know there's a lot of testimony yet to be heard, but I'm just asking you to remember this as you go through this. Sitting beside me to my left is a gentleman that has brought some leadership and progressive leadership to this state we've not seen in a long, long time. Now, I've been here with Technical College. I've watched them for a long time. And we've got someone who's created a huge success story for us, and proof is in the pudding. And if he tells me he can do it at 12, I'm with him.
Oh, but Senator, this doesn't say 12. It says no less than 12, so it can go higher.
That's correct.
And and so that decision will be made by the board. Like for each project, the board will decide this project is 12, this project is 20, this project is 30. I mean, what is it? I mean, that's what this amendment contemplates. Is that the way you think it'll work?
I think that this board, from what I've heard him say, as he's talked to all of the schools that he has, they believe they can make 12 work. I don't think there's anything that makes them go above 12.
Well, it says no less than 12.
No, but it's 12.
Well, if it ought to, then why don't we just say 12 and not no less than 12?
Well, I think that would clearly, look, I don't want to argue your amendment for you, but that would clearly be in conflict with what he says with the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is designed, if someone wants to do 20, they can do 20. I think that's what that's about.
Okay.
I think he's trying to avoid the conflict between the two pieces of language. That's what it looks like.
And I appreciate that, and I just want to make sure that Dr. May still feels comfortable saying with this language, these projects will be able to go forward.
I am comfortable with that language.
Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right, members, we have amendment number 1383 before the committee. Is there, Senator Schobel, Office 1383, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, 1383 is adopted. All right, Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Adley, as you know, I co-authored your bill early. And the reason I did that, because I can tell you that no area of this state needs a qualified workforce more than the area that I represent, Southwest Louisiana.
Right.
We have $48 billion, not million, $1 billion of projects committed to our area. With that comes problems, a lot of infrastructure problems, but the greatest problem we have is a qualified workforce. Nobody has supported higher education more than I have, my own university, McNeese State University, and we will continue to do that. This committee is torn between two good friends here today, but I think we are all on the same page in that we're committed to higher education, our community college system, our universities and colleges. So I commend you for bringing the bill. Dr. May, thank you for your leadership. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you,
All right,
sir.
thank you, Senator Jones. All right, there's no other questions. We have a number of people who have filled out cards on both sides. I'd like to read those in and then invite those speaking for the motion to the table. For the motion, but not requesting to speak, Megan Hudson, Tori Buckles, Lily Murphy, Donna Whittington, Marie Santani, Brenda Wren, Dino Paternostra, Michael Heck, Tommy Fauché, Henry Freelou, James Grace, Jesse McCormick, also Marion Fox, Chris Coulon, Renee Roberts, Ashley Brusada, Jim Henderson, Joshua Burrow, Chris Guidry, Eric Sundstrom, another Eric Sundstrom, I'm sure there's only one, Randy Haney. Thank God. Randy Haney with Ingalls and Randy Haney with Blueprint, Louisiana. And Eric Sundstrom was Eric Sundstrom, City of Alexandria, and Eric Sundstrom with Home of Terrebonne Chamber of Commerce. Okay. All those are in favor of not requesting to speak. We also have people who are here for informational purposes and not speaking. They are Ronnie Ellis, Kay McDaniel, Barbara Hanson, Will Rainwright, Neil Aspinwall, Earl Metter, Robert Levy, Richard Lipsby, Dr. Steve Hilbert, Winfred Sabile, Jimmy Long, Monty Sullivan, Dr. Joe May, who's testified, and Ms. Natalie Harder, all have filled out cards and said they are willing to provide information if requested. We do have some people who have filled out green cards in support of and would like to speak. I'd like to ask those people to come to the table right now, starting with Charles DeWitt, Deborah Randolph, and Mayor Clarence Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's kind of strange. I got here. I've never filled out a card before since I've been here coming to this place. It's kind of funny, but anyway. I just want to tell y'all that I'm glad that you all are taking this bill up and looking at a problem that we've had in this state. We always talk about our colleges and our kids that are leaving the town and leaving the state and going to get jobs. But you know what? We're working. We're making our education system work. They like our people. They get them to get a job. Our problem is having the companies here that can have those graduates there and then have a workforce under them to work. Now, I was glad to see Senator John, I'm going to say Representative Senator John, whenever he brought up his area. Whenever the best kept secret in Louisiana is $50 billion being spent in Calcasieu Parish. Now, I'm just going to tell you, nobody wants to say, I want to think about it, but nobody says it. Senator Tarver's area growing leaps and bounds up there and can grow more. What you are doing, I think, here is putting a mark on your record whenever you leave. There's always things you like to do whenever you leave from here is look back at the good things that you do. And I can tell you that I think this is one of the better things and best things you can do is to make sure that a person that cannot finish at 4 years can go into this 2 years, get him a degree of some sort, and get him a workforce way that he can go make a living for his family and stay here, because you know why? Those companies will come if you've got workers. They're not coming here if you don't have workers. I mean, that's just a proven fact. Teachers, where do they all go? They all go sit over at Texas. Got good teachers, but you know where they go? They go to Texas. Pays better, things like that are better. We need to get it to where we got more people paying taxes for sure now in this state, to where we can keep it rolling and keep adding to it, to where you aren't having a big problem with these budgets as you can. I hate that it's 3 years before anything starts taking place, but that's just the way it is. And with that, I want to tell you all thank you for taking time, ladies and gentlemen. And I have a letter of support here from Mayor Jock Roy, the city of Alexandria, that I'd like to have put into the record. Thank you all very much. Thank you all for listening.
All right, thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Yes, ma'am. Senator Jones.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for being here today. And if I vote for this, will I finally get forgiveness for voting against making LSUA a 4-year university?
It depends on how many times you vote.
You've held that over my head for many, many years, Mr. Speaker.
I'd hope it kind of continues on. But yes, thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Ms. Randolph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Deborah Randolph. I'm the President and CEO of the Central Louisiana Chamber of Commerce in Alexandria. Appreciate the opportunity to say a few words about the bill. In fact, I have 900 members of my chamber, and this bill is the #1 priority that my board and members have chosen to back during this legislative session. It's critical to us because of the types of workers that we've identified that we're going to need both now and in the future. We have a good start in developing our region as a manufacturing center of excellence. We have Union Tank Car. We have, of course, Procter & Gamble, Plastipac, Hayes Manufacturing, AFCO. The list goes on. We're attracting new business and industry, and you're going to hear more about that in a couple of minutes. But we see such a large percentage of the workers that we're going to need in the future needing more than a high school diploma, but less than that 4-year degree. Not that we don't also support our 4-year LSUA and those degrees that it has to offer. So we appreciate your consideration and would ask you to move this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Randolph. And Mayor Fields, how are you, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Coming from the city of Pineville, obviously the twin city to Alexandria, I think for quite some time now we've identified our needs, particularly not only in the central Louisiana area, but I think the impact around the state is pretty obvious also. Mrs. Randolph talked about some of those industries. I can tell you in the city of Pineville, a lot of those industries are in the city of Pineville when you talk about the Procter & Gamble's and the Plastipacs and all of those industries, not counting the ones that I'll speak of, IP, which we lost a few years ago, but the need for those qualified workers. By the way, I came out of industry. I worked for a company, and I'll mention a name called Central Louisiana Electric Company, CLECO. I think you pretty much know who they are from the electrical side. And there are some needs and have been needs there, as well as just a $1 billion facility was completed in the Central Louisiana area not very long ago when you talk about a power facility. And, there was quite a need for, obviously, construction workers who specialize in certain areas, and we're seeing that now in our community, particularly being able to compete, but also putting together that workforce. Let me also mention something else I believe that's going to become of importance to us also. In Pineville, in particular, we have 3 major state facilities. The outcome right now of one of those obviously is unknown, and that's Charity Hospital, UEP, but also we've been impacted recently and over the past several years at Pinecrest State Facility and also Central Louisiana State Hospital. There will come a need under the circumstances, understandably, that some of those individuals will need to be hopefully reemployed, and there may become a need that they be reemployed under the community and technical college system. So there's a lot of pluses for this to go forward, but most importantly to prepare our workforce to be able to, and we've worked very hard to put together in our efforts to attract businesses. Now we need to make sure that we fill the infrastructure of those businesses, and that's human beings. So I would ask that you move favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We appreciate you being here. Mr. Joe Rosier and Jim Clinton. Rosier? Is it I-E-R? Roser. All right, Mr. Roser. Welcome, gentlemen.
My name is Joe Rozier. I'm the president and CEO of the Rapides Foundation in Alexandria. We're a health philanthropy that serves 9 parishes in the center of the state. Our mission is to improve health status, and while we fund access to care and health behaviors, we've made the link to educational and attainment and economic opportunity and income for improved health status. And so we've long pursued education and the ability to participate in the workforce. So Jim will tell you all of the economic development aspects of this, but we believe there needs to be this continuum of educational opportunities through and including the university level, but it's absolutely essential for the future incomes of the residents of Central Louisiana that they have these type of educational and training opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Clinton, how are you, sir?
Yes, I'm good. How are you? I'm Jim Clinton. I'm president of the Central Louisiana Economic Development Alliance. I returned to Louisiana about 5 years ago after a sojourn in North Carolina. The Rapides Foundation was just getting ready to issue a report called Beyond High School. They looked at the graduates, they looked at the business and industry needs, and they looked at the output from all of the educational institutions in Central Louisiana. They found a gap of about 6,000 jobs a year. 6,000 new jobs were being created that required more than a high school degree and less than a 4-year degree in that economy. And it was happening year after year after year. All of the institutions together, public and private, were filling about 1,000 of those. The primary recommendation of that report was that we needed an upgraded community college. Our facility looks like it's out of the 60s. Programmatically, it looks like it's out of the 40s. We've been working very hard ever since the issuance of that report to get to where we are today. We've had support from Dr. May. We did a national search for a new chancellor. Dr. Rodney Ellis is with us. The business community is 100% behind this, as you heard from Deborah Randolph. What we need is your forbearance, your support to take this next step. We know that the jobs are out there. We're winning on the private sector side. As you heard from Mayor Fields, we have some big challenges on the public sector side. I would add Fort Polk to the list of challenges that he gave you, because we could be looking at dramatic reductions at Fort Polk. So we have to win on the private sector side. The need for us, the primary overwhelming need, is to fill the gap in people who have who need more than a high school education and less than a four-year degree. The Rapides Foundation is investing millions of dollars in building work-ready communities throughout central Louisiana. They've managed to certify 3,600 high school-age students as being work-ready through ACT. It's a stunning number at this point. We have to be able to deal with that at the next level. We need the facility to do that. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here.
With you, gentlemen, for being here. All right, we also have a number of people who have filled out white cards, which means they're not either opposed or for, and are wishing to speak. Mr. Jan Roberts, Mr. Rodney Ellis, and Mr. Bubba Raspberry. Mr. Raspberry, why don't you hold off for a second, please, and let me take, well, Dr. Purcell, so. And what about Ms. Jan Roberts? Well, you checked a card that said you'd like to speak. Is that true? You wave it? Okay. And Mr. Rodney Ellis? Excuse me, are you Rodney Ellis? Yes. And are you waving or you want to speak? Waving. Yes, sir. All right. Okay. Then who's at the table with you, Mr. Purcell?
Bubba Raspberry is with me.
Yeah,
He's my chairman.
Mr. Raspberry, how are you, sir?
Good, and yourself, sir?
Very good. Thank you for being here. Go ahead.
I'm Jim Purcell, Commissioner of Higher Education. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, as you're well aware, the Regents is by law designated as the representative of public higher education. The law further provides expressly that the Regents is responsible for providing advice and recommendations concerning higher education to the governor and the legislature. Also, the Regents is constitutionally created coordinating board for the state's higher education. Therefore, my testimony today is to fulfill that duty and to provide advice and recommendations to the legislature. As we begin to look at Senate Bill 204, I wanted to mention a few things. There was a mention about a facilities utilization report. We're real proud of that particular report, but in that report, it might have been slightly misstated. There is probably not a need for classrooms at any of our institutions, public or private, except at LSU for classroom space. For labs, most of the facilities are adequate at most of our universities. There are some needs at some of the technical colleges, but just some. I'd like to briefly outline two major areas of concern for Senate Bill 204, and they are as follows. The Constitution prescribes a process for determining facility priorities for higher education, and that was not followed. Senate Bill 204 has an adverse impact on other systems' capital and operation budgets. And I will say at this point, too, the 10% match or the 12% match are interesting things, but there's also another bill out there that y'all may have to consider, which is House Bill 185, which gives a tax credit to anybody that contributes to LCTCS, which would take any contribution back out to the contributors to that in the form of tax credit. So that would be something you should be looking forward to hearing later on. The 1974 Louisiana Constitution gives the Board of Regents several specific powers and responsibilities. Those specific authority pertinent to this discussion are the following, I'll quote, "The Board of Regents is constitutionally authorized to require every management board to submit its operational and capital needs. It is further authorized to make recommendations for the budget for capital construction and improvements to the governor and the legislature. The board also recommends priorities for capital constructions and improvement. The allocation of $263 million proposed in Senate Bill 204 for a construction project was never presented to the Regents by LCTCS. Regents, therefore, made no recommendations on the proposed allocation or proposed construction, and the legislature consequently has not considered the Regents' recommendations on this matter. Senate Bill 204 deviates from the constitutional requirements for addressing constructional needs of higher education institutions. The Board of Regents did provide recommendations for capital construction projects this year for institutions of higher education. Board of Regents' priorities for this year were based on our exhaustive analysis of the state's needs, and they were really for three things: ADA compliance issues, major renovation projects, and emergency repair items. These were the obvious priorities, as deferred maintenance for our facilities exceeds $1.7 billion. Because of the current financial constraints on the operating budgets, the Board of Regents made a clear decision to place a high priority on requests for emergency projects to all 4 systems, including those such as major repairs and re-roofing and those compliance and safety code issues. It is interesting to note that LCTS did make requests to the Board of Regents for these did not make a request for these construction projects that you see through the appropriate process, as the other 3 post-secondary systems did. They did make a list and a request that did go through, but oddly that list that relates to Senate Bill 204 is very different than the priorities credited by LCTCS during the normal and appropriate process. The second area of concern is how Senate Bill 204 impacts the budgets of other institutions. Senate Bill 204 not only impacts facilities requests, but also the everyday operating budgets of institutions. Because the bonds will be paid with general fund dollars, it will reduce available general funds for operations for the next 20 years or so. Over the last 5 years, the general fund dollars appropriated to higher education institutions has decreased from $1.48 billion to the currently proposed $229 million. And this, of course, would take another 10% or more off the top. This is a decrease of 85% in state general fund appropriations in the current executive budget. There are big needs in education at all our institutions, both 2-year and 4-year. We've been subject to budget reductions throughout the years, for the last few years. There are very few dollars available in the operating budget to maintain existing facilities. To add to our building maintenance woes, in December 2012, the Facility Planning and Control Office within the Division of Administration eliminated the roofing program, which had previously provided mechanisms for institutions to apply for roof replacements. There are many budget requests that are emergency requests that we thought we should prioritize rather than new construction. We've been working real hard with our campuses from feedback from the legislature to make our campuses more efficient and effective, to share resources, to share facilities, and that's been our push and our effort in response to your requests. Senate Bill 204 would also add another $280 million in debt payable of about $20 million a year for the next couple decades. We all value the work of LCTCS. I've been a strong advocate of the importance of addressing workforce needs, and we support those efforts, but it doesn't require new buildings at this time. Our construction needs, our development needs, our workforce needs to occur over the next 2 years, and that will be really prior before these construction projects come into place. If we don't address those needs now, we'll really actually have big issues. But this is not a construction bill for this time. If another system had attempted the same kind of effort, we would also had similar concerns. Would request that you reconsider this legislation, as it does impact the institutions in a negative way.
All right, thank you. Mr. Raspberry.
Thank you very much. I'm W.C. Raspberry, Jr. I'm the chairman of the Board of Regents. I live in Shreveport. Ladies and gentlemen, what the future, should this keep moving, it's a disruption of the order as we know it, and as disorderly as it can be, but as we know it. The very existence of the previously mentioned constitutional tenets that the Board of Regents was formed for was to coordinate the development of higher ed, trying to be as ecumenical, if you'll let me use that word, southwest, southeast, northeast, northwest, central, and try to use the limited sources of money that we've had, and also to react to the demands of that economic development puts on higher ed. No one at the Board of Regents certainly doesn't recognize and understand all of the need for workforce development. We're working with every single thing we can, spend an enormous amount of effort with that. We've seen from 60-40, 4-year to 2-year. Now we're moving back to the other average, which we should do.
That's something we need to do. But again, I think should something like this happen, you can face in the future the men and women that will sit in these chairs. Some of you won't be here. It'll be 4 different entities operating independently, developing their own politics for a probably smaller pie. The excess capacity issue that Dr. Purcell talked about, it's my thought that if we have excess capacity at a 4-year school, why not use that very same space with a 2-year school? No one's talking about stopping the education. We're talking about fiscal responsibility here, rational use of our resources, and then also not promoting and or causing debt in the future. The reason we're in this room suffering is because of poor thought, possibly 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. We all know that. I would encourage you to think about that. Think about the match money also. When there's a tax incentive there, that means the state pays. I think that which is not exactly on this subject, but the cataclysmic events that will occur when this budget is returned at the end of this session. What's going to happen to all of our schools, including our community and technical colleges, which we're all most sensitive to, is going to be dramatic. If you speak to any leader of any campus in the state of Louisiana now, they are as uncomfortable, as despondent, and without their hope is lessening. I mentioned this in another committee meeting. I asked one gentleman, how are you operating? He said, sir, we're operating on loyalty. Well, we cannot operate on loyalty. We cannot operate on pushing financial debt in the future. It is impossible to plan when you've done that. And then I will assure you and all of my colleagues and friends at the LCTCS and Dr. Joe May specifically and Dr. Adley that the Board of Regents will do every single thing they possibly can to fill these voids in the spots where it needs it the most at this moment. That's our job. That's what we will do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Resberry. Do you want to comment on the letter that has been passed out to committee?
Okay. Excuse me?
You want to comment on the letter that issued by the Board of Regents, signed by you, regarding the constitutionality of this bill?
Yes, sir. That's just from our legal staff, the summation of the position of the Board of Regents. I don't know. I think it speaks for itself. I would I was remiss in not introducing some other members of the Board of Regents. I know Mr. Bob Levy from Ruston is here. Joel Dupre is here. Mr. Richard Lipsey are here. You might enjoy, I won't say enjoy, you might be informed more. Treasurer Kennedy was at the last meeting, and he was quite specific about his view about the bonding capacities and what this will do in the future. I believe there's some members of his staff that are here that might be able to inform you more about how it relates to bonding capacity and future debt service obligations. Did I answer your question, or did you ask me about
the letter? Speaks for itself.
Yes, sir.
Senator Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Dr. Purcell, always good to see you. I think you're doing an excellent job. Can you go a little into detail on how the Regents picks which projects they deem important? It's a process. I don't think anybody that follows me knows that I'm not 100% on board with. So again, I'm caught between the Scylla and Charybdis on this bill, where what may be important to a particular area may not be important to the Board of Regents. Can you go a little into detail?
Yes, sir. As the coordinating board, what we do is we ask each of the systems to identify their priorities for their construction needs, their emergency projects, building projects, roofing needs, all those kind of things, and then they're asked to rank order those in their board meetings, prioritize those in a process, and then bring them to us, And what we do is we sort of prioritize all of those by melding all the requests from all the different groups into what we think matters. And then, of course, when we go and do our visits and look at campuses, we can make some determination of what the priority requests are or whatever. We also do take into consideration the changing market. We've highlighted, I've been going around talking about how important Lake Charles is to our future, that we need to address the workforce needs there. The Shreveport Port area, very important. Southeast Baton Rouge, Ascension Parish, all those are areas that I would say we need to make some emphasis on. Whether it needs to be in facilities today, certainly offering the appropriate courses in those areas in whatever space we can is important.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically like a top 10 list, right, of
That's
projects?
correct. What we get is we get guidance from Division of Administration, what amount of funds are available. They prioritize their top 10 list. We look through those lists, and then we look at our prioritization based on our visits.
Are any of the projects in Senate Bill 204 contained on that top 10?
I would have to ask staff specifically, but I wouldn't say that there's a good match there.
Do you have staff here that can answer that question?
Hi, Barbara Goodson, Board of Regents. In the list that we received from LCTCS, we had 2 projects that we requested in to facility planning. One was for the Delta Community College, and the other one was for Sewella. Those were the only 2 that we
And
actually...
where on the, do you have a number for the bill?
That's in the bill?
Project?
No, I did not tie it to it.
That'd be Louisiana Delta Community College. There's a couple of them on the list. There are 3,
There's a 5.1 for Technology and Career Training Center.
Okay, that would be on line 35, page 4. They have it here as a 4.5.
Right. There were some different numbers between what was submitted to us and what was actually put in the bill. We
And
did
what-
have a little bit of difficulty matching some of those up.
What number was that in your top 10?
We had 5 on my top 10. And actually, as the commissioner said, we receive lists from the schools. They rank their order, and we, from each system, and then from their ranking, we try to combine them all together and look at the, and it's not necessarily a top 10. In our emergency projects, we had 33. On Delta, it'll take me probably a few minutes because my eyesight is not as good as it used to be, but I'll find that for you in a few minutes. Sewella was the other one for $10 million for an automotive center.
That would be in the bill, line 44, Project Y. Yeah, page 5.
Those were the 2 that we received
So of
that we
your-
recommended. We had 2 other projects that they submitted to us that we put in the 5-year plan. One was for South Central Louisiana Technical College, $9 million for P-TECH. And the other one was North Shore Technical, $5.3 million for a workforce training center, and we had those in our 5-year.
Okay. And all those 2 projects that you just referenced can also be found on page 5. So you've got a couple here.
Right, there's a couple that overlap, but if you look at, let's say, for Delgado, for example, I think that the request to us, Barbara, is what?
Right. The only request we received for Delgado is, I think, a $40,000 baseball locker room, and there's about $90 million in Senate Bill 204.
Well, Dr. Purcell knows how important I find facility improvements for athletics. And anybody that's followed the career of my family knows how much we value bringing home the bacon, which is probably why they put me on finance and not revenue and fizz. Smart move on their part. Yeah, I think it's interesting that of what you find as a priority doesn't necessarily match up in this bill.
Well, let me just say
Not
that,
that any of these projects aren't a priority. I want to make that clear.
well, submitted to us was another $159 million. It's not in 204. That's what we got. What was in 204 is $243 million that we didn't see.
So in other words, the universities themselves did not
They did not-
request funding for those particular. And you bring up a good point about Delgado, and I was having a conversation with my good friend Senator Murray about this. There are aspects of this bill with particular projects that will be in direct conflict with four-year institutions in their programs. I bring up the Nichols Culinary Institute. Delgado, God knows, needs a culinary school. They have a program, and far be it from me to say that the culinary epicenter of this country, in my opinion, in the city of New Orleans, doesn't deserve a proper culinary institute. However, we just broke ground a few short months ago on a four-year culinary degree at Nichols State University, which is, an hour away from the heart of downtown New Orleans. Okay, and the state's commitment to that project was $8 million, and the Delgado money for their culinary school is $9 million. So the state would be and I'm not trying to say that any particular thing is more important than the other, but I'm just making the point that the state obligation for a four-year building of the same degree was $8 million. The match from the private was $4 million. Okay, give or take a couple $100,000 on that project. And here you have, without the amendment that the committee earlier adopted, you would have had a $9 million project. So there's a lot of inequity built into the bill.
And I just want to make sure that I clarify with your comment that it's interesting the difference on what we recommend versus what is being recommended in the bill. We did not see them. Mm-hmm. They did not come to us. So it's hard for us to recommend if it's the first time we see it, it's in a bill. And that's the point I really wanted to make. We saw an entirely different list of projects.
Yeah. And quite often I'd imagine you have administrators at these particular facilities that may have not gotten any capital outlay projects done in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So you say, hey, listen, this may not be a priority for you, but we're going to build into this bill this particular project X for $3 million, and it may not be something that they find, as it sounds like that's what you're telling me in your testimony, that they may not have found that as a priority, yet this is a project that, should this bill make it through the process, they're going to get that facility funded.
Yeah, we would, of course.
It puts them in a catch-22 as well.
Right. I think the big thing we tried to do is we tried to address the emergency request. We have a lot of storms in this state.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of issues. And we're basically trying to address those particular issues. Those we deemed as priorities. We actually lose some of our equipment when the roofs aren't fixed and those kind of things. Addressing ADA issues is a federal requirement. Those are things that we have to address. So when you look at all those in totality, certainly we want to totally support all the efforts to address the workforce. Like I said, I've worked real hard on trying to promote those activities. I don't think it needs to be totally done with brick and mortar. I don't think we need to wait 2 years to have a lot of these solutions done. I think we need to move activities in particular areas. And I'll give you one example that I suggested when I met with the LCTS on an activity. They had a glut of truck driver folks in one particular area because they had a truck driving program and they wanted to build another one somewhere else. And my original inclination to them is, well, let's just move the trucks for a period of time rather than build another simulator facility and all those kind of things somewhere else. We can, rotate those facilities like that. And I was in the community college system in Alabama, and that's what we did, is we often move things around to meet the needs.
And you bring up a great point that you and I have gone back and forth on, and that is the deferred maintenance aspect of, or lack thereof. Again, I was very excited to work with my university, four-year University, Nichols State University, to get them money for one of the first academic buildings to be built on that campus in almost 15 years. And while we were having those conversations, Dr. Halbert, in his infinite wisdom, made sure that I realized, he said, now listen, we need this particular project, but don't go off and start building me buildings around this campus. Okay, because number one, there's a funding component to the brand new building that we have to work into our budget. Okay, and if we don't have the proper revenue in, it makes it more difficult for us. You may seem to be helping us, but in reality, you'll be hurting us. And oh, by the way, Senator, if you can get any money through the capital outlay process for construction. I would appreciate it if we could put it towards deferred maintenance. And again, I refer to that roofing issue that we now find at all of our schools.
Yes.
So thank you, Dr. Purcell.
You're welcome. All right, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
I have one other thing I'd like to add. At our meeting that we had last week about this issue, the first we had heard, there was a motion that was passed, offered by Regent Royal Martin III, and if you would allow me, sir, I'd like to read that, and it was passed unanimously. The motion reads, while the Regents fully support the Louisiana Community and Technical College system and its initiative for workforce development, with the advice of counsel and the testimony of Treasurer John Kennedy, the Regents deem that the process utilized by the LCTCS Board violates Article 8 of the Louisiana Constitution. The LTCS Board directly submitted capital outlay request through pending legislation and failed to properly submit a complete capital outlay budget to the Board of Regents as specifically required by Article 8, Paragraph 5, thus circumventing the constitutionally established process for higher education budgeting. That was unanimously passed by our group.
Very good. There's no other questions. Thank you. Also, filling out green cards in support of, but not wishing to speak, Marie Santani, Lisa and Paul Hart, Betsy Barnes, Bridget Castine, Norman Browning, Debbie Doherty. All right, we have people who are here in opposition to this legislation. Mr. Kevin Cunningham with Southern University System Foundation is opposed but not willing to speak. We also have Mr. Whit Kling from the Treasurer's Office and Mr. Ron Henson from the Treasurer's Office. Would you come forward, please? Welcome, gentlemen.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members. I'm Wade Kling, the Director Secretary of the State Bond Commission.
I'm Ron Henson, First Assistant State Treasurer.
And our comments are basically going to be limited today in terms of the impact the bill potentially has in terms of the state's general obligation rating and the effective impact it would have on costs on both general obligation debt as well as appropriation dependency debt, which this bill would in fact make the debt. Currently, the state's general obligation rating and the index ratings for appropriation dependency debt rely heavily on our debt management plan. We just recently, last week, went through a general obligation rating with all the rating agencies. We were reaffirmed at AA for Fitch and S&P, and at AA2 with Moody's. If you look at their ratings report, a vast majority of that report was reflective of the debt management plan that the state has. If we go with this bill right here, it effectively removes the appropriation dependency debt for this bill out of the net state tax support limitation calculation. In effect, the rating agencies and our financial advisor agrees that the rating agencies will interpret that as being effectively that you have modified or you really don't have a debt management plan. You don't have a debt limitation. In addition, there's costs associated with that. If, in fact, they rate us down, a single step from AA to AA minus on a 20-year, on average right now, would get you about 25 to 50 basis points over 20 years. Appropriation dependency debt is indexed to general obligation debt. There is a natural 10 to 15 to 25% basis point cost differential between general fund obligation debt, full faith and credit debt, and appropriation dependency debt. So in effect, if there is a downgrade impact, it not only impacts the general obligation debt cost, but it will impact the appropriation dependency costs. And with that, I'll answer any questions that you have.
I think Mr. Tarver may have a question. Want me to go ahead? All right. I want to just emphasize three things, and Whit Whit kind of hit on all of them. One is this bill puts us in a perilous situation of breaking through, being put in a position of breaking through our debt limit, and that in and of itself causes us issues, not just with the law and the Constitution, but also in our ability to maintain a viable rating with the rating agencies. Those of you who were in the Bond Commission, I believe it was the last meeting, Whit, correct me if I'm wrong, our financial advisor spoke to us and indicated that if legislation such as this were to pass, that it would indeed negatively impact our state rating. And state rating has to do with the cost of borrowing money. And so if our rating goes down, it's going to cost us more to borrow money in the future, not just for this issue, but for other state issues as well. I'd also like to point out that this is, as Whit has indicated, an appropriation dependency debt, so you will be obligating the expenditure of future money, and that money comes from, as you know, and we'll have to deliberate very shortly, comes on top of an already very strained budget. So with those three issues, I'll yield to questions.
Mr. Henson, what's the purpose of the debt limit?
The purpose of the debt limit is to maintain a plan, if you will, a debt management plan, so that the state does not overextend itself.
Yes, sir. And basically, the state debt limitation came about as a result of the financial situation that we had in the late 80s that some of you certainly remember. Our debt percentage of revenues was close to 16-17%. It was eating into the general obligation. General fund money is available to fund operations. We were unable to issue debt. Rating agencies basically said, come up with a plan. The 6% was a phased-in approach to major state revenues as recognized by the Revenue Estimating Conference. It was a quote-unquote best practice at that point in time. I believe it still is. And it prohibits you, or it prevents you from overextending yourself in terms of issuing debt or relying on debt as a mechanism of either funding capital outlay to the detriment of operations.
In the 350, was that an arbitrary figure? How did we come up with 350?
350.
Isn't that the debt limit, $350 million?
The debt limit, no, sir. The additional capacity that you're able to do through capital outlay every year for bond issuances is based on a formula, and that formula at the time was $200 million in 1991, 92, Martha, and that basically equated to 6% of the major state revenues. It's indexed for inflation, so it has grown from 200 in 1992 to approximately 350 million if you calculate it today.
All right. In reflecting back on the construction business, which I've been in for over 40 years, construction projects, as you know, are bonded, and the purpose of those bonds is to ensure that the owners who contract with contractors furnishing a bond have their projects completed for certain costs.
Yes, sir.
As a contractor, not all jobs that you do are bonded. Some of them are bonded and some of them aren't. But when a bonding company comes in and looks at a contractor, they look at the jobs he has bonded, but they also look at the ones he doesn't have bonded, because that's exposure also. And if you have just a few projects bonded and most of the projects that you have aren't bonded, they still would restrict your bonding credit because your exposure is that total package. And I kind of relate that back to that $350 million, even though this money would be taken over and above or aside from the debt limits that we've already established for ourselves in the state. If I was a bonding, and I was out of the room, and I think you were probably commenting on that, it would seem that bonding rating agency would still understand that we had exposure over and above what our $350 million cap is, and if the larger that extra exposure is, probably the more you might scrutinize that state. I think ultimately it would mean you'd probably have higher rates because you have more exposure.
Yes, sir. The rating agencies, we currently, under current legislation that you have a couple of exceptions that are not considered in net state tax support debt, and they were very logical. Unemployment, any debt issued as related to unemployment, tax revenue bonds, those type of things, clearly outside of the general fund. The rating agencies, whether you pass this piece of legislation or not, if the money is being paid either directly or directly from the general fund, they're going to consider it net state tax supported debt. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
And what would that, and so what that mean?
Exactly what you're correct. You've got greater exposure, and you've got the same revenue base to cover that exposure. So you will have additional costs. There will be a rating impact, and there will be a cost. Now, I understand the way the bill is constructed, that cost won't occur for 2 or 3 years, but it's the same impact.
All right, very good. We have some questions. Senator Tarver?
I think you're saying if we pass this bill here, it's a great possibility that our bond rating could go down.
I think there's a potential for that to occur, if not now, in the near future, because again, if you look at their latest ratings, they gave great credence to two things. One, our debt management plan, the fact that we have general obligation debt secured by a bond security and redemption fund. If you eliminate that, basically you're going back to the reform periods in the late 80s, where we simply issued debt till we couldn't issue debt anymore.
I remember those days.
Yes, sir. And we were up against the wall. And we ended up having to do the recovery district. We had to issue $1.2 billion just to cover our obligations, simply because our debt service levels, not simply, but in large part because our debt service levels were so high.
All right. Senator Olan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would appreciate you being here and all you do.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
In I think it was 2007, a similar type of bill was passed. Was the rating negatively affected when that happened? And if not, why?
The reason was because the bill that was passed wouldn't have excluded it from, was not excluding it from net state tax supported debt. Those issues, there were 3 issues that were done, and they are contained within the net state tax supported debt. They are within the 6% limit.
Thank you.
Senator White.
Just quickly, what's these projects in this bill, number 204?
Yes.
Are they guaranteed? None of these are guaranteed. What's the process to even get them bonded or get them on the?
These are going to be, unless someone tells me differently, these are appropriation dependency. They are basically if they were done like the last ones, they're a corporation. Nonprofit corporation is created. There's a lease obligation agreement between them and the facility, and between the facility and LCTCS there's a lease agreement, and then between the LCTCS and the state there is a corresponding lease agreement where the state is providing an appropriation of direct general fund monies in an amount sufficient to pay debt service to the amount of bonds that are issued on behalf of the LCTCS.
Right.
So in effect, it would be cheaper to do this as a general obligation issue.
But those appropriations are going to be subject to who? The legislature?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's got to come before this body.
Yes,
no
sir.
sooner than 3 years.
And there would be, and I don't know that there's ever been, I've been here 40-something years, and we've never not appropriated debt for our debt requirement.
Well, it still has to come before this body, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Senator LaFleur.
In addition, what other factors currently affect our overall rating?
Economy, management, financial factors such as, the debt limitation, the revenue estimating conference, the expenditure limitation.
UAL, doesn't that have probably one of the biggest impacts?
UAL, in fact, last week Moody's issued a new ratings factor, a new ratings evaluation methodology. In the past, UAL had a significant impact. It was not as direct as the new methodology is now. So,
it's not really the methodology has changed, but the risk and the inadequacy of the funds to do UAL is still the same, aren't they?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So they changed the formula and we got a better rating? They changed the
No, we didn't get a better rating. We are not at the highest rating we've ever been. We did take a step backwards, a couple of years ago. We have retained the AA rating with S&P and Fitch. Unfortunately, we did not retain that rating with Moody's.
Just, purely speculative, but the size of this issuance, how it's funded, would you say it would have a negligible impact on the rating?
It's not I don't think it's the dollar amount. It's the...
To set off against the debt?
It's the perception that you no longer are sticking to your debt management plan.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator LaFleur. All right, there's no other questions. Thank you very much. We have Legislative Fiscal Office has produced a fiscal note. Could we maybe get somebody to comment on that fiscal note for us?
Hi, I'm Debbie Vivian, Legislative Fiscal Office.
Yes, ma'am. How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Good. You prepared a fiscal note for Senate Bill 204?
I did.
Would you walk us through that, please?
If you give me just a second, please. All right, Senate Bill 204 provides a list of construction projects. It's specific projects and specific amounts that would allow for the selling of bonds under a corporation outside of net state tax supported debt. Each project would require 10% or $1 million in local funds or matching funds. Private sources are eligible. And these bonds are set up similar to the bonds that were issued after the hurricane. And they would be run through a corporation. They would be considered outside of net state tax supported debt. However, it would still be considered state debt, potentially, in the eyes of bond rating agencies.
And what do you see? What's the total fiscal impact of this legislation?
The fiscal impact is based on the amount of the bonds selling at level debt at a 5% interest rate. And it's not necessarily the exact cost of what would be expended for these bonds, because that would be based on the structure of the bonds that are issued. You could issue the bonds in any manner that you'd want. It's not necessarily going to be $20 million a year. That's level debt. You could structure the bonds to pay however you want. You could pay very little in the first years and backload it. It depends on how you structure the bonds. This is just typically how we look at the cost of bonds, even when we're looking at GO issues. We do level debt, knowing that you could structure this any way that you want.
All right. It says, the fiscal note says, directs 28 LCTCS construction projects that would be funded with $251,610,500 in appropriation-dependent bonds up to 30 years issued through the local government, environmental facilities, community development authority. So that's pretty much what the fiscal impact is. Is that correct?
Well, that's how it would come about. The fiscal impact is estimated at $20 million here because they're assuming level debt over 30 years at 5%. That isn't how they'd have to structure the bonds. They could structure the bonds any way they wanted once it came up for issue. So
when you say construct it any way they want, they could for size or a time?
Anything they decide.
Either one.
Right.
Okay.
They aren't bound by the structure of the debt. They're bound by the amount.
So is it limited to $20 million a year?
No.
Okay, so it could be
It's not. This is an estimate.
I understand. I'm trying to get you to say it.
Oh, sorry. This is an estimate. It doesn't necessarily have to be $20 million a year.
Okay.
It will depend on how they actually structure the final bonds.
All right.
Sorry.
That's okay. Are there any questions? All right, thank you very much. Jessica? All right, so what's the pleasure of the committee? Senator, we'd be disappointed if you didn't. Please come forward. I'm so sorry. Sorry, Robert. Senator, would you like to close? Would you like to close on your bill, Senator?
I would.
Thank you.
After all that testimony, yes, sir, I just would like to make a couple of comments to you that I think are critical. First, I want you to know I'm sitting here by myself. I'm sitting here by myself for a reason. Nothing in the Constitution says that a state senator or legislator cannot write whatever bill he wants to write to fund whatever he wants to fund. If you read the Constitution of this state, and I just happen to bring it with me so that you can look at it for yourself, nothing requires these projects to go through the Board of Regents. This Constitution says that the Board of Regents can put together a plan, submit it to us, and make any recommendation they want to make. It's a recommendation. We are the ones authorized to decide what we're going to fund. Period. This is not an MFP. It is solely a recommendation. I am amazed as I sit here and listen to people talk to you about the Constitution and hear such words out of a very good friend from Shreveport, Bubba. I don't even know that I could spell the word that he said this was going to do. All the great harm that's going to have, the disruption of order. Now, let me just explain this to y'all. Under the Blanco administration, we passed bonds outside of the bond debt. Nothing was disrupted. When I passed the first bill in 2007, Senator Lang, when they tell you it was not outside the limit, we passed it telling people it was outside the limit because it requires a 2/3 vote. I explained that on the floor of the House and the Senate. We got a unanimous vote through the process, but when we got before the Bond Commission, they determined that because I complied with everything the law requires, but because I didn't write in the bill that it was outside the limit, they weren't going to interpret it that way. So they forced it inside where we were. This time, to meet their satisfaction, I wrote in this bill, it takes a 2/3 vote. I mean, that's what it's doing. And it is clearly not the first time we have done it. And the world has not collapsed around us when we have done it. I heard, look at this. They make a recommendation, and this Constitution says that if it's not expressly spelled out, the responsibility rests solely with the boards of these universities. This legislature, as a courtesy to the Board of Regents, has worked with them in the manner that they have described to you. But nothing requires you to do that. It's that simple. That's why I came to sit here by myself. When they brought up the study and they said, well, that capacity, that's really not an issue. No, it's not an issue because the report I showed you that showed the need for capacity was at LSU and these technical colleges. When they did the capacity study for these technical colleges, they refused to recognize 49,000 adult ed students. They're not even inside that report, and they say they're short now, and they didn't even include that number. They themselves have said they're short capacity. This is a capacity issue to build the labor force that we have to have. I have to tell you that every time I listen to Ron and Whit, who I've known for years, are very good friends, I might say, they very carefully, the way they explain these things. Well, we've never done this before, but we have done it before. Look, I'm going to tell y'all something about this credit rating. Y'all probably know it better than me because of the committee that you sit on. But I've sat in a lot of those credit meetings, and I've been in New York in those meetings. And you got several forms of credit. Well, one, when you get ready to do your bonds itself, but the state rating, that's important. But the state rating is not impacted till you take a step. And I can only tell you, when we took the step before, it was not impacted at all. But we will not know until we take the step. You're sitting here, Mr. Chairman, look, I've been in your shoes. This is pitiful. $28 billion budget, 20 of it to feds. You got $8 billion to deal with. $6 billion of it's dedicated. You got $2 billion to play with. It's pitiful. $8 billion state general fund, and we give away $7 billion in exemptions to people in the private sector while our schools are falling apart. And you got a guy that shows up here, this fellow Joe May. I was here when we've been through other leaders. I was here before we didn't have an LTCS board. I was here when it was who your legislator was, how much money you got. We've gone through massive changes, and we got a fellow leading us that's progressive, that's made moves, made changes. This system's growing. They're providing the labor force we need, and we cannot survive without it. I'll repeat to you, every 100 kids that enter the 9th grade, 20 going to get a college degree, 5 are going to get some college. 75 out of 100 of your constituents rely on this. And your business community relies on this to survive. Look, I've heard all the arguments many times. I'm as conservative as anybody around here about this budget. But sometimes we have to do things to grow the state. And we can't get caught up in squabbles between bureaucrats. You're elected by people to make these decisions. I trust your judgment. I hope you pass the bill with amendment.
We are on Senate Bill 204 as amended. What's the pleasure of the committee? Senator Mills, excuse me, Senator Murray. All right, Senator Mills moved that we report Senate Bill 204 favorable. Is there objection? Chair objects. I'd like to ask Secretary to call the roll, please. And Senator, listen, I think you did a marvelous job presenting the bill. I don't disagree with anything that you said. I don't know where to get $20 million from. We ought to go cut it from somebody else who can't afford it. So to that extent, I've committed that type of hearing to bills that have a fiscal note. So please excuse me, it's not a lack of faith in you or Dr. May. So I'd like to ask the Secretary to call the roll, please. Start with me.
Senator Donahue.
No.
No. Senator Chabert. No. Senator Alam. Yes. Yes. Senator Buffington. Yes. Yes. Senator Clater. No. No. Senator Johns.
Yes.
Yes. Senator LaFleur.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Mills.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Murray.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Tarver.
Yes.
Yes. Senator White.
Yes.
Yes. 8 yeas and 3 nays.
Congratulations, Senator.
You've been very attentive. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, sir. All right, Senator White's up next.